See, if the God of the universe created you and I with a purpose, then it would only make sense that he would want to somehow or some way communicate with us. So maybe God revealed himself to a select group of people and inspired them to write everything down. It should be noted that your faith doesn't make the Bible true. Just because you have faith in something does not make it true. Listen, there's only one reason to believe in Christianity, and that's because it's true.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. My name is Andrew, and you are listening to the $1 Apologist podcast. And if you haven't done it already, get online. We have a website, the1dollarapologist.com. That's the one. That's not spelled out. One is the numeral $1, apologist. That's singular.com. Get online, subscribe. It won't cost you a thing. You'll get to listen to all of our podcasts we put out and read some articles that we put out. So today I have a special guest with us. He is a creationist who goes around and teaches creation seminars. His name is Steve Grohman. And Steve, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Real quickly, I just want you to tell our listeners where you hail from, who you are, how long you've been doing this ministry. So go ahead and take your time.
Sure. I'm born and raised in San Antonio from South Texas, and we have been full-time on the road for 26 years. We're in our 26th year. We are in churches, big churches and little bitty churches, and public schools, elementary, middle, high schools, secular universities and colleges, and Christian universities and colleges, and homeschool meetings and Christian school meetings, and just had a lot of radio, TV interviews and that kind of thing, and just traveling the country. Been to every state many, many times over the years, and just talking about creation versus evolution and trying to get people to realize that things matter. We got to get involved in our children's lives.
Absolutely.
And being on the road 26 years we've seen a lot of change, even in the early years, even in public schools. They're just different. Everything's different today, and people are so busy that we just really don't pour into our children really probably the way we should. Kind of sounds hard, I know, but it's true, and but we got to get involved in our kids' lives, because there's a lot of information, whether it's in the schools or state parks or museums or national parks or friends and movies and video games and everything, that just we get this indoctrination with evolution. We don't even know what's happening sometimes. And when it starts out at a very young age, our children don't know what to do with that information.
Right.
We try to teach them the Bible's true, and then they get these facts, so-called, out there, and it conflicts, and they don't know what to do with it. And they end up developing their own understanding about things, and oftentimes it's just, as they grow up, it just becomes muddled, And so it's been a really, really exciting time traveling and just meeting people and seeing the light switches come on in their eyes, in their minds, and all of a sudden they just realize. And it's so cool to see parents come up to us. We get it all the time. You see that little boy over there, 8-year-old or 7-year-old? Because we go Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Here it is, Monday night or Tuesday night or whatever, before the meeting. He said, we got to get there. We got to hurry up and get to church, Mommy. We don't want to miss it. So it's neat to see the kids get involved, and they want to learn. They really do want to know.
Right.
And so, been on the road a long time, and it's been a joy. It's been a joy.
Now, I've been accused of being a fast talker. In fact, the very first time I ever preached, my grandfather, Bishop Frank Tamil, said to me, Andrew, it was good. You did good. But you talk too fast.
There's always that but.
But you talk too fast. I am a fast talker, but I think you are actually faster than I am. I heard you speak on Sunday here at Mequon Church, CLC in Mequon, and I thought to myself, he speaks faster than me. Yeah. So I think you speak in word gusts of about 350 a minute. That's fine, because I always say I love listening to fast talkers, because it really makes me pay attention. If you give me time to be distracted by slow talking me, I will be distracted.
Our minds wander.
Yeah.
It's funny because we get those kind of comments. People will come up and say, man, when you first started on Sunday, I thought, there's no way I'm going to keep up. And here we are on like Tuesday night already. And they'll say, man, I'm with you. And I'm really getting used to it. So,
right. So here we go.
There's a lot of information.
Yeah, there is. On Sunday, I heard you talk about our youth and how they are disengaging
Right.
from the church at a rapid stage. And we think that it happens when they go to college.
Right.
But actually, they've made up their mind in middle school.
Right.
And sometimes they just appease their parents by going through the motions of a youth group or of church. But they've really formed their worldview at a young age. And we really, as a Christian apologist, we really have to start getting involved in our children's life. Like you said, J. Warner Wallace, a Christian apologist, he said this. He said, we as parents are our children's first Christian apologists. In other words, we need to tell them the truth without just saying, you just need to have faith. We need to explain, for every one what we give them, we have to give them two whys.
Right.
This is why it's true, and this is why it's important.
Right.
We're going to cross-examine evolution. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 17. This is the NLT version. It says, the first to speak in court sounds right until the cross-examination begins. All right, so let's cross-examine evolution. The first question I'm going to ask you, Steve, is how do you define evolution? What's the definition of the word evolution?
You know, it's funny. I actually show a copy of Webster's Dictionary defining evolution on one of our services. And it goes on and talking about how new species arise from previous species or pre-existing species. It's this humongous paragraph worth of definition. Anybody can look it up in Webster's Dictionary. But the bottom line is they never explain where life comes from, but it is basically non-life turning into life and then turning into some other variety of life over time. Mm-hmm. You know, it's fun too, because I like when I do school meetings, I will just start right off. Just first thing I do, I'll say, okay, we're going to talk about creation versus evolution. And I'll say, let's find out where you are. Somebody tell me what science is. What makes something science? Because evolution is considered science. Mm-hmm. You know? And I just stop right there, and I wait for the students to start saying, and they will always do it. Sometimes it takes a little while just to, you know, nobody wants to speak first.
No one wants to be embarrassed.
But then they'll, you know, one will say you have to observe it, one will say you have to study, one will say you have to do experiments, one will say, I mean, to be science, all science textbooks say this. You have to observe, test, demonstrate, do experiments. And I'll say, what is religion? And rapidly, somebody will say, a belief. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, let's just go with that. Science is something you can observe, test, demonstrate, repeat. Belief is what religion is. And I have a science textbook. I usually carry a biology textbook in with me. I said, what is this? It's a science book, biology book. Okay. In the first few pages, it says, what is science? Every science textbook within the first 30 pages will define science. And it's always observation, looking, testing, experimenting, hypotheses, all that stuff. Usually on page 300 and something, they'll have the evidence for evolution chapter. And so we'll skip back there, and some of them, I mean, I actually go into the audience and I have one of the students read something so they know I'm not making it up. And there's one book I use that it says that basically everything goes back to a common ancestor, as in figure 12.3, and it shows a 4-limb drawing of a bird, horse, and human. Yeah. And it says we have a common ancestor. And then I remind them, what is science? Well, we have to observe and test. Anybody ever done that? And then I'll ask them, is any science in the Bible in Genesis chapter 1? And usually they'll say God made everything. And I'll remind them, that's a belief. We weren't there to see it and observe it. We can't reproduce it. We believe it. So that's a faith. They'll say something, you know, and finally they'll get it. Everything reproduces after its kind. Dogs have dogs, birds have birds, horses have horses, tomatoes have tomatoes. We've got the science on our side. It's always presented as evolution is this magical thing that everything came about by, but they have zero evidence for it. Mm-hmm. And so therefore it's not science. But evolution by definition is non-life turning into life and then turning into some other variety of life over time. But it's not science. That's where the problem comes in.
Is that a historical science? Is that what it's called, historical science?
Well, that's what some people will call it. But it's interpreting the evidence.
Sure.
And if you know, I mean, we're in a room that has chairs. How did the chairs get here? Well, they just accidentally showed up one day. Well, no, a custodian brought them in. Well, no, I brought them in. Well, no, a pastor brought them in. I mean, we can believe how the chairs got in here, but there's no way to know it unless we have an actual account of it, not an interpretation of the evidence. And that's where the big difference is, because we have an account first. Right. You know, the Bible says what it says, and we can believe it. True, that's a faith. But when we look out at the evidence and see that the evidence squares up with what it says, and it was written thousands of years ago, by the way, by people that were never in North America, you know, that we know of. Moses didn't live here, you know. But what they wrote thousands of years ago over on the other side of Earth, it is evident today on our side that that's even true. That's powerful evidence when you think about it. We're not interpreting the evidence first and coming up with an answer. We've got the description first, and the evidence fits. That's a big difference.
I think it's safe to say, or even fair to say, that evolution is a worldview that is putting God out of a job. And it's everywhere you go. I'm going to just give you a couple quotes. This is from my favorite atheist, Richard Dawkins. All right, he says, evolution is a fact. Beyond reasonable doubt, beyond serious doubt, beyond sane, informed, intelligent doubt, beyond doubt, evolution is fact. The evidence for evolution is at least as strong as the evidence for the Holocaust. He also went on to say this in his book, The Greatest Show on Earth. It is absolutely safe to say that if you meet someone who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane, or wicked, but I'd rather not consider that. Here is Jerry Coyne from the University of Chicago, I believe. He says, evolution is a fact, and far from casting doubt on Darwinism, the evidence gathered by scientists over the past century and a half support it completely. Michael Roos, philosopher of science from Florida State University, said this: evolution is fact, fact, fact. And even the science guy, Bill Nye, who's not so much a science guy,
right?
He said this: creationism is not appropriate for children, and I say to the grown-ups, if you want to deny evolution and live in your world, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them. I would say that evolution is everywhere you look, but it's especially in academia. All right, so the question becomes, is there just as much evidence for evolution as there is for the Holocaust? Is evolution fact, fact, fact? Is evolution a fact far beyond any doubt? Where and when and how did we go from the theory of evolution to the fact of evolution?
Yeah, that's an interesting setup and lineup there of quotes. There's so many. These people they mean business, and I actually have a little short video clip of Richard Dawkins that just is beyond what anybody can imagine. And it opens people's eyes in a big way. These people hate God when you get right down to it. That may seem strong, but that's their own words. In their own words, they say this kind of thing. And I actually play video clips in our meetings of short clips of them doing that. But all science textbooks, again, when they define science, usually within the first 50 pages, often within 30 pages, 35 pages, early on in the books, they define science. And it is always the same: observing, testing, experimenting, repeating, so on, forming these hypotheses. A hypothesis, they say, is something that always has to be tested, must be tested. I mean, they repeat these kinds of statements when they're describing the various steps of science. You cannot have a theory. A theory, by definition, a hypothesis can only be advanced to a theory when many related hypotheses have been shown to be true. So technically, evolution is not even a hypothesis that's been shown. Nobody can watch something turn to something else. Nobody can watch something come from something else. So technically, the hypothesis that could even happen is not true, much less to get enough hypotheses showing the same thing to advance it to a theory stage. Mm-hmm. So technically, we call it the theory of evolution, but there's no such thing as a theory of evolution because it's not even a good hypothesis that's been shown to be true. But then they take that theory word and take it on up into fact. And there's absolutely no evidence for it. That's why oftentimes the proponents of evolution, I go into secular universities, I'm telling you, it gets violent sometimes. It gets hostile. And people cannot imagine. And it's been that way. It's nothing new. It's been that way for forever. I mean, for years with this topic. But when they don't have evidence, actual hard science to back it up, the only thing they have left is to throw darts at the person personally.
Sure.
To try to shut them down, intimidate, and quiet them. And I mean, I've been seeing that for years. But evolution is not a fact, even though they call it that. And there are many quotes from many, many leading evolutionists that call it a fact. But again, it's not even a theory. It, quite frankly, is not even a hypothesis. There's no such thing as evolutionary science. You'll hear those two words together. Evolution says non-life turns to life and turns to some other changes. It turns into some other life. I mean, we used to be monkeys and all that, people say. apes of some sort, whatever. They don't have a clue what it was, but prior to that, we had to go through. You look at any science textbook where they show the evolutionary trees. Everything goes back to some slime of some sort. Well, it's purely a belief.
Right.
I did a meeting one time at a public high school. It was going to be an after-school meeting. One of the science teachers had the largest room. She had a big lab that kind of rolled tables that could all be moved out of the way or whatever. So she said, you can use my room. She doesn't agree with me. She doesn't like me. She doesn't have anything to do with it. But one of the students, is in her class, and she said we could use her room. And she's going to be grading papers. And it was an after-school event. We didn't know if 2 kids were going to show up or 202. We had no idea. Well, after about 5 minutes of me talking, presenting some stuff, this lady, she's way on the other end of the room, and she puts her pen or pencil, whatever it was she was using, grading papers, she puts it down. And she just really starts listening. And about 5 more minutes go by, 6, 7 minutes, she comes and sits up in with the kids, the students. I'm thinking she's arming for, she's loaded for bear. She's going to try to make a fool of me after question and answer time or whatever. That's what I'm thinking, right? But at the end, we had a great time. It was like a 2-hour event, and at the end, people are milling around, hanging around, whatever, and start dispersing away, and just a handful of students left. She came up to me and said, can I talk to you a minute? I said, sure. She said, I thought I knew what you were going to say, and I know the answers. I know the yeah buts around it. She said, but I got to tell you something. You are the first person that has clearly made me see clear we have just a belief system. We don't have science. And I said, no, ma'am, you don't. I'm happy for that. I said, give me one of your textbooks. I showed copies of textbooks, and people can always say, well, that's not our book. I just ask her, let me see one of your textbooks. She brings me a biology book. I'd never seen this particular book at this point. I just started flipping through. I said, watch this. Within 30 pages, here we go. And it was like on page 29, what is science? So I said, look what it says here, observation, testing. And I said, watch this. I'd never seen this book before. I grabbed a chunk of pages, went over to like page 330. I think 332 is where it just kind of flipped over to. And we're like smack dab into the evidence for evolution chapter. And it shows all this kind of stuff that everything goes back to something else. I said, look what that says right there. She says, yeah, I see that. I'm holding the other, now I've got the stack of pages in my hand. I flip it back over to what is science. I said, what does it say? Observation, testing, experiment, repeat. Flip it back over. And what does that say? Everything has a common ancestor. But what is science? I'm going back and forth. And she said, I get it. I see it. I've never seen that before.
Right.
And it's people only can teach what they know. If they've never heard the other side,
right.
That's why I don't take that kind of stuff lightly, being able to go into a public setting or a secular setting, even if it's a radio show or a TV show interview. They never heard from a creationist. They only hear about creation from an evolutionist that doesn't like creation or agree with it.
Right.
Well, you can't get a logical perspective on that.
It's almost as if evolution is the only game in town that's being
the
taught
way they look at it,
in the high school. They don't give you any other theories.
Right.
They don't give you a theory of intelligent design. They don't give you a theory of creation.
Because they can't.
Yeah.
Because it makes too much sense.
Yeah.
And kids start asking questions.
Now, there's one constant in the theory of evolution, and that constant, I call it a rescuing device, and that is the constant of time. If you're going to believe in the theory of evolution, you have to believe in billions and billions of years for something to change. Now, I call this a rescuing device because then when you ask people, hey, how come we don't see change right now? Well, then they'll say what? Well, you can't see it because it needs billions and billions of years to change. And so you'll never be able to see it in real time. And to me, that's like, how do you even go after something like that? It's like it's like circular reasoning, but it's a fail-safe for evolution.
But that is what they say. That is absolute, because I get that all the time. But here's the problem with that. That is totally flawed thinking on their part. That could potentially be true if you start the process now. But since it's been happening for hundreds of millions of years, they can't apply that logically, because there should be things in that process that are all jumbled up all along the way.
Sure.
You don't just change from having flippers to having legs. There's a process that takes place. Okay, fine. If the process starts today, which it doesn't, it can't, but if it did, we would not be able to perceive that because our lifetimes are way too short. But if it's already been happening for hundreds of millions of years, there should be all kinds of evidence we're in the middle of where things aren't making it, or they're dying off, or they're, one wing, one arm, or, so that's a flawed concept, but they do use that a lot because if you start from today, that's true. We would never see it. But it didn't start today, is where the biggest part of the problem comes in.
There should be some kind of transitional
all over
fossils,
you shouldn't
transitional
be able
links.
to scratch the surface of the earth without finding some kind of something that tried to change but didn't quite make it. Because he, developed legs and limbs but never got a lung.
Yeah.
So it never got lungs. But they should be everywhere, and there's nothing.
Right. Now, there are different types of evolution. There's cosmic evolution, stellar evolution, chemical evolution, organic evolution, and then we have macro and microevolution. The most basic definition of evolution is change through time.
Right.
Okay. So explain to my listeners the difference between macroevolution and microevolution.
First off, when I talk with people about this stuff, I don't ever give them their terms. I don't use those terms because I'm not going to use the term evolution because there's no such thing. But in a nutshell, they say there's a small, minuscule at the cellular level and the atomic level and such that evolution is taking place, and then there's the major leaps of differences. Not leaps, that's the wrong word for it, but there's a major transition that takes place where it's even visibly obvious, But the problem is there's no evidence for either one of those. There is no evidence for either one of them. The issue is God made everything and says repeatedly in the first verse of the Bible, everything reproduces after its kind. There are varieties of tomatoes, but they're still tomatoes.
Right.
There are varieties of peppers, but they're still peppers. There's a variety of lettuce, but it's still lettuce. There's a variety of dogs, but they're still dogs. There is a variation within the created kind, but it's still the same kind.
Right.
God says everything reproduces after its kind. But to say that a dog can turn into a cat or an elephant or a person is preposterous. And we would all think, okay, that's true, that can't happen. But that is what evolution teaches. But also it teaches, as it changed into that you've got at the microscopic level, these changes that are taking place, very minuscule changes over time. And there's no evidence for either of those, for any form of evolution at all. So I don't even like to give them their terms.
Do you think with the micro, because I had taught some homeschoolers, and I said, if you're going to believe in microevolution, I said it's basically change through time, change in maybe gene frequency, some kind of limited common descent, and you can talk about the birds that Darwin talks about, who through time had to adapt to certain changes. Their beaks got longer or shorter because of certain environment, and I always say that at the end, but they're still birds.
They're still birds.
They didn't go from a bird to a dinosaur, from a bird to a horse.
And they stayed finch.
Yeah.
They're still reproducing after their kind.
Absolutely. So,
a quick something about that. Our son is over in Europe right now, and last week he went to Darwin's house.
Really?
And I'm going to show a couple pictures at tonight's meeting we're having at the church. But he sent us a picture of the original finches that Darwin got, that he collected. They've got them taxidermied. They're still birds.
Yeah.
But that was what Darwin said. Some have big, thick beaks. Some have wimpy, little, lightweight beaks. So they must have a common ancestor. Well, yes, they have an ancestor of a finch. The finch of a finch is an ancestor.
Sure.
But then to take that a leap further and say those finch have the same ancestor as the giraffe, cantaloupe, elephants, people,
right.
and it's just, to me, it's just preposterous. People can certainly believe that. Funny thing. We were doing a meeting one time, and before the football team was going to have a game, we show up usually on Friday, and then our meetings start on Sunday. And they wanted me to speak to the football team before the high school football team before they get on the bus to leave. So Pastor and I are at the school, and I was going to speak to the football team a little bit before they take off. And there's like a room sort of attached to the library at this particular school, big kind of conference room where they were gathering. And they had this humongous pedestal, podium, whatever you want to call it, with a huge, this thing was like, I've never seen a dictionary, Random House dictionary. It was like, 2 feet by 18 inch or something, it was thick. And I said, hey, watch this, Pastor. Went over this book and grabbed a bunch of pages, flipped it over. We went to religion, looked at the definition of religion. And it says a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe. number one definition. That's exactly what evolution is. It is a set of beliefs about this place. And again, people are free to believe whatever they want, but it qualifies as religion, not science.
Right.
So it was just kind of fun because he's just looking at this. He's like, "Whoa!" Because he'd never seen that or thought of that or whatever. But it's there. I mean, that's what evolution is. It qualifies as religion, not science.
So, and I know you don't like to use the term microevolution or macroevolution, but I just want to real quickly give the difference between the two. So evolution is a change through time, change in gene frequency, a limited common descent. Microevolution is a change within a kind. This is considered a horizontal change within a kind. And I don't think this is very controversial when you think about that, because like you said, a bird still is a bird.
But it's not evolution. That's where the problem comes in. And when we get used to hearing it and saying it and agreeing, okay, I'll agree with this, but not this. I'm not going to agree with anything to do with evolution.
Right.
Because God says they reproduce after their kind. I try to stick to as biblical explanations as is possible.
Right.
And if the Bible would have used the word evolution, so be it. That'd be a different story. But yeah, anyway, I don't want to beat that necessarily, but I just feel real strong. It's like species. There's no such thing as a species. They don't know what a species is.
Right.
I shouldn't say there's no such thing. They don't know. I show many science articles all the way up to current time where they don't know what a species is. They don't have any idea where to divide that out. So why would we say that word when the people that made up the word don't even agree with what it means?
Sure.
But we can agree with a dog is still a dog. That's the kind of animal it is, and so on. So I always try to encourage people, use what the Bible says as opposed to what man has come up with, because man's terms, number one, they don't agree with each other. Within the same science, within the same field, they don't agree with each other. But number two, they don't even know what the definition ultimately really is, because there's no such thing in the first place. So it fluctuates. So anyway, just a little side note.
Yeah. Well, another term that man uses is macroevolution, which is, they talk about universal common descent. All organisms have descended from a common ancestor solely through unguided natural processes and random mutation. Macroevolution, we go from fish to amphibians to reptiles to mammals, from the goo to the zoo to you.
Right.
Now this, I believe, is controversial.